So welcome, and I'm delighted to have you here, and all of those who hopefully will be watching this video after. I just wanted to say that caregiving is, for me, an opportunity, and most people don't want to hear that, and find it is more an opportunity to be a victim than it is an opportunity to explore themselves or change or evolve. And certainly when I went into this role as a 37-year-old, young woman, really, in the middle of I'm still in the middle of my life. I don't even think I'm anywhere near the end of it. I was, I was living in New York at the time. I had one child. My husband and I were having a fantastic time. And suddenly I had this new, very big responsibility in my life that I didn't really know how to address. And what happened was that very quickly I did what now I understand is what my brain does, and what most of our brains do, is that we just want to solve the problem. So in my case, which may be different to your case, some people sort of have been told, okay, this is a chronic illness, we know the trajectory, may not know how long, but it's a decline. So we have to sort of adjust ourselves not only to that experience, but also, our expectations may be different. But from my perspective, what happened to me was that I didn't really know what I was dealing with. She was a baby. They did not diagnose her for about 10 years. And so I was in this kind of fog, dealing with symptoms, dealing with features that were confusing. And at the same time, my response was, okay, I've just got to fix the problem in any way that I can. And so I became extremely reactionary, everything. And when I say reactionary, it wasn't like, oh my God, reactionary. It was more about the fact that here's a problem, I'm going to react to it. Here's a thing, it's a therapist who's asking me to do something. It's a doctor who's telling me I need to now look at this. It was a whole host of different problems all the time that were being thrown at me. And so my response to that over time, well, frankly, it just kind of started to exhaust me. And there was also the expectation of the relationship that I was going to have with my daughter that was not panning out. It just wasn't happening. So, and I was, a child has cognitive impairment and, developmental delays, tragedy. And it was thought, but I had a woman, this much younger person than me, who was helping me kind of babysit my daughter. And she was big on meditation, and Vipassana meditation in particular, which is this 10 days silent. Go and do Vipassana, go and do, and I was like, right now, apart from, okay, yeah, I get it, maybe it's going to make me a bit calmer, maybe it's going to make me a bit happier, but really, how is meditation going to sort of contribute to this drama that I'm in? And eventually I went. Seeing the madness. Fully aware of that madness until I spent 10 days on my own, um, in my own soup, I think is the best way to describe it, because it just call anyone, you've given you are just with you and your thoughts all day long. And all I kept seeing was the misery that I'm causing myself over and over again, the way that the loops and the sort of like this endless sort of, and I could get so stuck on ideas and I just wouldn't let them go. And I just had to have sort of some kind of, um, sense of legitimacy or feel like this makes sense or I'm right. I had to feel like I'm right or that I've got the answer and over again, and I see myself criticize it. And it was just like this madness, frankly. And at the end of those 10 days, I only had learned this remarkable technique where really, I mean, what is mindful meditation? You are learning to bring your attention back to whatever the technique is. So let's say it's you just have to focus on this area of your nose for a couple of days. Okay. And that's all you have to do. And you walk how your thoughts keep wandering off, and you're like, oh, it's gone again. I'm coming back to my nose. Oh, it's gone again. And that just that action in itself, I have found to be incredibly valuable as a caregiver, because where our thoughts go, the drama that we create for ourselves is is um is the beginning of how we can start to rethink the care experience. And so fast forward, what happened was that after, like, I don't know, I carried on, I was caring for her, and then I did homeschooling, which was in itself another remarkable thing, in that it was just me and her in the room. My ego was not required. Like it was just me and her, joining her in her non-verbal sort of world. My daughter now, she's more adjusted, but she's not verbal. I'm dealing with someone who doesn't speak. I've no idea half the time what she's thinking. And much of the time, I don't know what she's thinking. So I have to be very aware of what I think she is thinking. And I became much more aware of my homeschooling period with her, because I just realized that I'm interpreting things all the time that aren't necessarily true. And then, of course, because I had the awareness from the meditation, it was like, oh, look at look where you're going with your thoughts here. Look what you're feeling at this moment in time. So that then became the next phase. And then after that, the final phase of this really was when at some point after about 3 or 4 years of doing this, I suddenly was like, I want to go back out in the world again. I want to work. I love my daughter, but I just want to get out in the world and be with adults and interact with people. And so I went back out into the world, and I got this crazy job working for this cybersecurity company. And I was in the thick of this, very smart group of people who all day long were solving problems. And it was just about looking outside the box, right? And whatever you'd been told, well, why does it have to be like that? It can be something else. And while I was in that in that cybersecurity environment, that was the place where I suddenly started to think, you know what? I don't know if people have been given the whole picture about caregiving. And, I'm feeling better than ever before. And isn't that strange? Because actually, I went into this role thinking I'm doomed. I'm the unluckiest person ever. Like, I am so unfortunate. And I had like friends who'd say things to me like, you've got an acute problem you're dealing with. And like, it's not a very nice thing to think about your daughter as an acute problem, but I could also understand how they saw it. Like, this is an acute problem. You're dealing with something chronic here. And maybe this is audacious of me, but I think we can do it better. I just think we can do it a lot better. And I don't think we've been given the information I don't think we're given the training. I don't think we're given the awareness. I just think we've just been sold a really poor story. And I don't think in this world today, with all of the research information that we have on happiness and how to construct emotions and even quantum physics, frankly, all these things are now sort of out there showing us that we can think about our reality in many different ways. And so we don't have to get stuck in one story. That caregiving, for most of us, has become this sort of pre-written script, frankly. And so that's where this all comes from, really. This is where I am today with caregiving, and I run courses and workshops and webinars and one-to-one and train people. And I'm just out there to help anyone in this challenging daily experience. And I don't wish to take away anybody's challenges, because I know how challenging caregiving can be, but I want you to know that part of it comes from, frankly, the fact that we just haven't been trained. And I want to share with you some ideas and things that I put together, and just want to share this for a moment. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Are you with me? Can you see my screen here?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So here we have Leah, my sweet daughter, who's 17 now. And I just want to say that you should never, ever stop believing or thinking that you can, in one way or another, help or communicate with your loved one. And even when it seems impossible, and even when it's not clear that you are even getting through to them, don't ever give up. And that's not to drive you nuts. That's just to let you know that there are ways of us communicating with our loved ones that have nothing to do with what we think is communication. And if you want to take it to a quantum understanding of reality, it is all energy. And we are energy. And our energy really matters in this caregiving experience, and way beyond, way beyond. So I now want to take us into experience and just deconstruct this a bit with you. So before we even go down that path, I actually wanted to look at something that I believe is a universal experience of caregiving, because sometimes people are like, yeah, but Tanya, you've got a kid, and I'm looking after my parent, and I'm a wife looking after a husband. We're not talking the same language here. But I actually think, and certainly from experience working with caregivers, there are universal experiences here that we're having as caregivers. And the first one is this emotional attachment, right? And the emotional attachment is a very important point for us to consider, because when we think about emotional attachment, what we're thinking about here is that it's an extension of an existing relationship, right? So you go into it and you're like, okay, this is my husband or my wife, or this is my parent. And so there's already, in many cases, there's already baggage, there's already history with that person, with those people. And there's also an expectation as you go into the role that you should behave perhaps in a certain way because of that relationship, right? So you're still behaving like a child, even though now you're having to take on all of this responsibility that you've never had to deal with before. But you're still the child. And there's still this history and all of these memories, and you're having to go through this now, and you still play out that relationship. But now what's happened is actually you've been a giver. And something that I think is a bit better now, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I certainly, it didn't exist when I went into this role. I didn't feel like it was a headline in any way, was that most people don't really identify with being caregivers. They're like, yeah, it's my mother, my father, my husband, but they, they don't really say, but I'm a caregiver. And let's face it, as you said, it's not a very sexy name, is it? Being a caregiver, like who wants to be a caregiver? It just sounds, ugh. But being a caregiver means, that's the word we've been given, a specific role. And that role requires to have a level of knowledge that, frankly, we're just not. And we have to think about that when we are going through this daily, and I'll use this word here, relentless experience, right? And relentless is an important word here. Words are very important in general, but relentless is a really important word, because let's face it, it's like it's coming at us. That's why we end up being also called like warriors and soldiers and things, because it kind of feels like you've gone into the war zone and you're in this zone of, I don't know what's coming next, and it's unpredictable, and any moment now something else is going to happen. And that kind of relentless and unpredictable sort of nature of this role is something that we do not take into consideration enough. It drives us nuts, causes us to burn out, it causes us to lose ourselves. All of those things happen because of this relentless, unpredictable situation we're in. It drives our brain crazy. It's part of relentless is that it stress, and we'll talk more about stress because it's just central to the whole story. But chronic stress is what forms our behavior over time. And I would go as far as to say we become addicted to it as well. And we're all kind of addicted to stress these days, unfortunately, and we'll talk about this more, but we live in a stressful world. We've sort of got used to stress being the sort of one of the underlying features of our lives. But the chronic stress caregiving, it's like, yeah, I was stressed and now I'm really stressed. Like, it's just like, oh, let's take this to the next level of stress. And yet we try to normalize a large part of the stress that we go through. I mean, like, I've had friends hang out with me, and when they see what I do, they're like, how do you do that? How do you go about doing that and still kind of look calm? And that's because we've normalized it, or we've sort of got used to it. And we've always got used, there are also caregivers who get used to traumatic experiences as well. It becomes obviously ingrained, embodied in their daily lives. And it's very painful and sad and upsetting. I work with caregivers who are trauma. It's very hard for them to change it, but they don't give up, by the way. They don't give up. So stress is another, of course, universal experience of caregiving. And as I've already not trained for this role, so go in thinking, oh, well, I should know how to be a caregiver, nice person, right? Human beings are taught to care. Like we spend longer looking after our love, our children, or we have role models. Most of us have parents who've brought us up. We see others bringing people up, and so we've got kind of role models of what care looks like. It's a very sophisticated, advanced part of who we are, is being a caring individual. And yet, of course, couple that with stress, and it becomes almost a toxic combination. Then, of course, another universal experience of caregiving are the negative emotions that we experience, which are very hard for us to share. Most people don't want to hang out with people who are miserable or depressed or angry or fearful. So we become isolated with our experiences. And of course, there's grief. And grief in itself is, it's a whole topic in itself. And I normally leave out grief because it's so big. It's just a big part of this story. I actually think that this grief that we feel and what we are being required to learn here, if we just look at those points and, wow, if I could think about this in a different way, if I could innovate around this, I go with this. So now let's take a look at a definition of enmeshed, right? And so this is before we move into caregiver enmeshed. Just let's look at enmeshed. What does it mean? So I'm going to read this. To catch or be involved in something unpleasant or dangerous from which it is difficult to escape. That is a definition of enmeshed. And I just wrote down some feeling behaviors that kind of come associated when you feel caught or involved in something unpleasant or dangerous, which you think, it's difficult to escape from it. You become hypervigilant, you become, you go into fight or flight mode, you become fearful, you go into that sort of tunnel vision thing. I'll just explain the tunnel vision thing. It's like, if if a tiger's running after me, I don't have time to look at the flowers. I don't have time to graze. I am finding safety and shelter, right? That tunnel vision in the fight or flight state, you are just wanting to get out of danger. So you become very narrow-minded when you are stressed, right? I just need to focus on the problem. I just need to solve this, and then I'll get back to you. That's what fight or flight tunnel vision is. So now the other, of course, is that we can also become paranoid, right? We can become insecure. What's going to come next? That's part of being in a war kind of situation. Where is the attacker going to hit me next? And that also brings in ideas and thoughts for innovation, if we think about it, because we can start to simulate. This is something that I definitely experienced as, working in my cybersecurity environment, where they were simulating, where's the attacker coming from? And if the attacker is coming from here, how am I going to respond? And if it's coming from here, what am I going to do? And they had like a plan. They planned it out. They had like, I don't know, hundreds of scenarios. And if you think about it, for us, we get caught in the same scenario, doing the same thing, responding in the same way. And then we're like, why do I feel locked in this thing? And that's because we haven't given ourselves any options. So now if we move into, okay, and I've sort of played with this a little bit because I just it's a sort of a, to catch, be involved in something unpleasant with your loved one, which you perceive is escape and dangerous if you do, right? So what that means is, in that moment, you feel like you can get out of the experience that you're having. right? You are enmeshed in their experience. Or their emotions, whatever they're going through at that moment in time, you are now there too. You're experiencing it too. You cannot get out of that experience in that moment. And more than that, you perceive it as dangerous if you do. Like, if I don't remain vigilant, if I'm not on top of this, if I'm not controlling this situation right now, then, what if's going to come about, and my negativity bias is going to set in, and I'm going to imagine the worst case scenario for this. And of course, I'm tunnel vision, so I'm not seeing any other options. I'm not thinking that there's anything else that I could do in this moment. I've just jumped to the first conclusion. I'm fearful, I'm distracted. So all of these things come. And of course, we also feel guilty, which is just crazy, but it's also in the mix. Like, we feel guilty if we leave them, if we do escape, if we do try to leave them and potentially leave them in a dangerous situation, which we have created in. We're not sure if it's really a dangerous situation, but it may. We're feeling guilty. So all that mess is what we are enrolled in, frankly, in caregiving enmeshment experience. And then, of course, you've got the mirror neurons. So, and I'm sort of bringing mirror neurons into this because, let's face it, your mirror neurons, you were wired to simulate. You like when you see someone smile, what do? You smile back at them. And that's what we've been trained to do. So when you see your loved one in what you perceive to be a difficult situation, regardless whether they are actually in a difficult situation, you feel probably quite miserable. So I've had times where I've gone into my daughter's room to wake her up in the morning, and she's pulled the sheets over her bed, over her head. She's just pulled the sheets over, and I'm getting her up, going to school, and my first thoughts are, oh no, she's sick. She's not going to go to school. What's my day going to be like? I don't have help. I've just made an appointment. Oh no, but when she goes to school, then I can't do this. Keep her at home. And this whole thing, I was like, I've created a whole scenario in my head. And then school bus said, don't come and pick her up. She's staying at home today. She's not well. 15 minutes later, she's there smiling at me. In that moment, this happened to me many. Why did you jump to that conclusion so quickly? And so now I've taught myself, Tanya, that first thought that you have could well be incorrect. It could well be incorrect. Like it's a distinct possibility. So I actually want to stop sharing for a minute. And I'm not sure if you're comfortable talking at all, because we are recording this, but I'm obviously offering you, and you can say to me, no, I don't want to talk about it right now. But if you are comfortable talking in any way about your enmeshed or one specific enmeshment experience, and if you're not comfortable talking about it, you can also just write it down, right? That's fine too. And that's fine. When I say write it down, not in the chat section, just write it down on your piece of paper for yourself. Like, write down one mesh situation, unless you're going to share it with me now, where you get caught. And welcome, Heather. It's good to meet you. Hi. Do you want to share? Then just unmute yourselves.
Hi there. I'm sorry I'm
Hi.
late. I was late coming
No,
to the show.
welcome.
Um, I just want to say I'm not sure that there's a way that I'm not enmeshed. Um, like that I'm caring for my mother who's quite elderly. And in that kind of situation, she is continuing to decline all the time. So there's new things that arise every day. And she just her own capacity um, to deal with her life and her body is less and less all the time. And so, like, I relate to you talking about your daughter pulling the sheets over her head. My mother doesn't do that, but there's like every day there's a different sort of response when I go to wake her up. And because she's had lots of health issues, it is it's just the question of, okay, what's, is this another infection? Is this a whatever? So um yeah, I maybe I shouldn't have tried to share, because in a way it's like I don't know how I'm not enmeshed in the caregiving role, um and having to try to interpret her behavior, her comments, her all of it. So that's all I would say, I guess.
Okay. I'll address that first. So, um, of course, when you are in a situation where daily you are being confronted with new challenges, things seem to be changing all the time. So that unpredictable, relentless feeling of is just all the time. In those moments, you are being required to respond, right? There's a stimulus and then there's your response. And the question becomes, what can I fill in that space between the two, right? And what I'm asking in this meeting, and we'll look at it even more in a minute, but what I'm asking you to think about is the space in between the stimulus and the response. Because I am willing to bet that your response has become a learnt response. It's a response that is driven by your brain that wants to have an outcome. It wants to know how long this is going to go on, and it's going to want to know how to best respond to the situation to get the best results. But given the fact that you understand that you are in a defining situation here, the best result isn't necessarily linked to your mother. The best result is actually linked how you are able to care for yourself. What would be the most loving response to yourself? And that is an extremely strange way to think, because as much as, we've heard about, self-care, whatever, and, and compassion to yourself and being loving to yourself and all those things. But those things, the reason why we caregivers go, yeah, whatever, is because we are in a state of stress. So we're tunnel vision. We just want to solve the problem. Like your mother seems to be in a state of need. So I need to find the solution. And until I know what that solution is, I'm not going to be able to calm down. That's That's our normal sort of loop. But here, you're not going to win. And that's a really hard thing to hear. And I'm sorry if I have said it in a way that perhaps sounds a little harsh. But you're not in this winning here. And that goes against being brought up to believe, against our culture of accomplishments, mission driven, all those things that we brought up to aspire to, no longer are relevant in the role. And instead, we're left with an experience that could be going on for a long time. And in that experience, which is my mother's declining, what experience do I have while that happens? And without awareness of yourself as you go about your day, seeing these different triggering events, without real awareness and without developing a practice, I would go as far as to say, you will keep getting caught. And that's not because you're a bad person. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it's absolutely to do with the fact that our brains are wired to work in a very specific way. So in the same way as when I did Vipassana and I saw my mind just walk, it would just go off in whichever direction it wanted to go and have whatever story itself. I had to, like a wild animal, like a horse, I had to bring that thing back and go, no, right? This is what you right now. So that, whatever that thing is, that's to happen in that space. And that becomes a practice, right? You may have done it in other things. We've kind of done it like, I've certainly done it, there's a delicious chocolate cake in front of me. Oh, I'd love a piece of that chocolate cake. There's the stimulus, chocolate cake, response, yum, give me some chocolate cake. The space middle goes, you know what? Do you really need that chocolate cake? Is that cake really going to help you? You're going to feel less good at yourself after you've, not always, of course, don't think I don't eat chocolate cake, but I'm just making a point here about how in other areas of our lives, we have developed a narrative that is more loving to ourselves, right? I'm using that word loving because we got to have loving in there. Like, it's not something we are trained to do, is be loving to ourselves. We are trained to act in survival. We're in survival mode most of the time, even though we look kind of, well put together and most of the time we are living in, my house can look nice. Go on holidays, I might look well put together, but actually I might be paranoid, insecure, and afraid. So those levels of survival that we're in become cemented in the caregiver experience. Big time. And it's an extension, it's a relationship that we've got with someone we love. We think we should behave in a certain way. There's an expectation. I haven't even got into social consciousness and sort of like what the cultural expectations are of how we should behave. Not to mention we're women, we should behave in a certain way too. It's like there's just one layer after the next of how we in this role should behave. So that space, frankly, we've never really given it any thought. And we've not been conditioned in any way to think about that space in a way that is going to serve us too. Instead, what I have found, and there are statistics on that, is that a high percentage of us burn out. In the end, even a high percentage of us die from stress. Not maybe the younger ones, but the older caregivers. 30% people as caregivers die than people who aren't caregivers. That's where this awareness is required. And when I speak about thinking about different ways, it's like literally you look at a problem. Oh, I'm going to do it like this instead. Oh, and it's not even necessarily that little message that goes off in your head when you are triggered by an event. It can also be, and this is why I refer to integrative caregiving, like as a holistic approach. Your whole life has to start changing. You have to start, being much more mindful about, am I doing the best that I can right now for myself to actually be able to give the best response in this moment? I'm going back into my 30s and early 40s, and I'm not, I'd go out. I've had such a hard week. Come on, let's go out and party. I'd come back 2, 3 a.m. in the morning with a hangover, and the next morning, 7 a.m., I'm back on. Guess who was feeling like death that morning? Guess who was not giving her best response that morning? And guess what part of my brain was learning my response, right? So we have to become aware in a completely different way. And this is why I actually think caregiving is an opportunity. Because you can't keep doing what you were doing before. It just doesn't work. And, it sort of, sometimes I use the metaphor of right? COVID happened, we're all like, oh, I just want to get back to normal. Let's get back to normal, right? And never really happened. We're not wearing a mask now, but normal never really came back. And the same thing's going to happen here. Like, it's not really going to, certainly if you're doing caring for a long time, like I'm in it now for 17 years. So my normal had to change. And I don't want to be a victim. If that answered your, hope that answers your question. And we will go into this a little bit more. But it's more about thinking what you in your head as a different thought in that moment. Does that make sense?
If you're asking me, I haven't been able to hear a chunk of what you said, so I'm not sure what.
Oh
no, I'm
no!
not sure what
You
you've
didn't
asked.
hear it all? Did you not hear it either?
I can. It's just choppy.
No, I can hear this. It's occasionally slips out, but I got what you were saying in general. It wasn't that bad.
Oh, I'm sorry if there was a bad. I'm sorry. Well, I'm hoping that you heard. I'm hoping the recording comes out well. And there will also be a transcript. So I could also mail that to you if you like, and you can read that. But so I'll leave it there for now. And I will also carry on with this presentation. But I hope that I've answered your question.
I appreciate very much everything that I have caught. So, and I'll look forward to filling in the gaps with the recording.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just say in response to a lot of what you said, Tanya, and also to Heather, similarly, I'm looking after my mum who has a condition which is neurodegenerative. There's so much of this experience which has been a struggle, but I also acknowledge that, like, I've changed, but I feel like there's this quiet kind of evolution going on within me of learning, which maybe no one else can see. I don't think I'm very well understood at the moment by a lot of people, but I feel like inevitably there's got to be some good stuff that will come, you know, because I think it's so hard, but then it's also like this learning every single day, which I don't think I would have had without this. And I often think, like, my heart breaks, but then it like cracks open and then it expands, and I'm like, there's more stuff going on then. And the self-care bit is so huge. If that's my bigger life lesson, then this is it here, you know. So anyway, there was just lots of chords clanging as you were speaking, so I was like, this is, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Thank you. Good. I definitely think that this is a big opportunity for our own personal growth. I really do. And to be honest, I can't let the subject go, because as I with the subject, it's just got bigger and bigger. And I say, I'm doing better now than ever before. And that not something that I ever imagined for myself in this role. So I want to just briefly touch on a second here. Share my screen here a little bit. Okay. So I just want to address a few things about sort of stress. So we're all familiar with stress. I don't need to talk too much about stress. But one aspect of stress that is worthy of our attention is something called microstressors. Now, actually, many of the stresses that we experience in our day, right? It's like, oh, the doctor, oh, I've just got to make that, oh, it's just the insurance, I've just got to help her into the bathtub, oh, I've got to make that meal, stuff that you're like, I should be able to do this. You know, it's easy. It's not rocket science that we're being asked to do here. And these stresses, over time, the problem with them is that they are actually happening under what is known as our fight or flight system. So now our fight or flight system, what it does is, you know, we have this very sophisticated sort of response system to threat. where the sympathetic nervous system comes straight into play and all of this sort of hormonal response occurs. And the next thing you know, you're running from the tiger. And, you know, we're able to sort of make very quick decisions, which ties into, by the way, obviously, you know, the enmeshment experience that we just conclude. We know that we've got the answer and we're just going to respond quickly. And then after the events occur, this parasympathetic sort of like, you know, the gas brakes put on and this whole hormonal response occurs that allows us to calm down. And so it's actually a very natural occurrence that happens here. But with microstressors, this fight, flight, freeze response does not kick in. And so what actually is happening is that it's all happening under the radar, and we are not properly attending to ourselves with these stresses. Right? If I said to you, oh, something big happened, you'd be like, oh, I need to just sit down. I need to drink a cup of tea. I need to, maybe I need to have, like, you know, something sweet as well, because like I'm just exhausted from what just happened now. Like that's a response to stress, right? In microstressors, we don't pay attention to what's happening to our body. So we keep pushing ourselves a bit further, a bit further, a bit further, and then we're not sleeping so well, and then we need to have a drink to calm down at night, and then we sit on the couch, and then we eat a whole bag of chips, and then we like sit up and look at our computers until the wrong time of night, and then the next thing you know, you're in this like nasty, addictive loop of habits. So very it's not that they're unique, but they characterize, that's the word, they characterize caregiver experience that it's like, I've just gained 20 pounds, I don't have any energy anymore, you know, I can't be bothered to go to the gym, I can't be bothered to see my friends, like I can't be bothered. It's all part of the same thing, and it's because we're not really attending to ourselves and the stress that we're experiencing. And as I also mentioned, it's important for us, and I want to just reiterate this bit, it's important for us to think about the sort of the illusory aspect of like of this enmeshment experience. Like we see that person being unwell or declining, or it triggers in one way or another, and we create a response in our head. And it's happening because of the way that our brains work, that we have to have an outcome. Like the way that our brains work is it wants to know what's the path, how long, and what's the outcome. Like that's our survival brain. To know how long is this going to go, you know, what am I going, and what will be the result is the way, and that's because survival is actually at the absolute core of the caregiver experience. And don't forget, we are enmeshed in somebody else's experience, right? We're enmeshed in their survival experience. We're mirror neuroning their experience. And so it's as if we're living their experience. Their experiences has become ours, which is crazy if you think about it. You're not, and you'll be walking around going, but I'm not sick. I'm healthy, I'm well. And yet now I've like 20 pounds, can't be bothered to go to the gym. I don't want to see any friends. I'd rather have a drink at night because that's the only way I can calm down. And I don't know how to sleep anymore, so I'm taking sleeping pills. And then later on, it's like, oh, I need to go And now I'm feeling depressed, and I'm just saying that while coping with something challenging, we have to start to take responsibility for our own actions and thoughts in this experience. And that's what I saw in Vipassana. I was calling myself the misery. Like, the reason why you're looking after your parents is you love them. You know, you may have them, they may drive you nuts, they may be very difficult, but at the end of the day, you're doing this particular role to do something that perhaps we've never done before in our lives. And that is care for ourselves too. And that is love ourselves too. Or a little, oh, in this role, do that too. Like, you cannot physically do this role without loving yourself too. Because otherwise, you will just get caught in the illusion. You will get caught in the story. You will. Words, possibly feel guilty, and go around believing that my happiness. I even heard the other day, this is a caregiver who's been doing it for years, and she said to me, I feel guilty that I am well, my son isn't. And that, you know, I don't feel that I should be happy if my son isn't. And I think at some level, not only is that culturally endorsed, right? We've been led to believe that we are supposed to be miserable victims in this role. You know, at best, we're told, go get a massage, go and see some friends. And I'm not saying any of these aren't good things to go and do. But when you're in the thick of it, like you two, and you're dealing with this, and that it's like, you know, there's firing going on all day long, and you're being triggered all day long, you've got to change up the game completely. It's a whole other level that you're being required to respond to what's going on around you. Frankly, we are not trained to respond. I'm going to show you something now that is kind of a bit, again, you're going to look at it and go, what is she talking about? But that's what we're here to do. We are here in a completely different way. And maybe something from this, it's got nothing to do with caregiving, by the way, but see if something in this kind of brings some idea for you. Wait.
These are the Navy SEALs, especially at the elite level. The Navy SEAls,
This is about the Navy SEAls, okay?
especially at the elite levels, These are incredibly
Right, let's start again. Here we go.
the Navy SEALs, especially at the elite levels, these are incredibly expensive groups of warfighters. SEAL Team 6, for example, Dev Group, it's an $85 million machine. That's what it takes to build a SEAL team. And once you get past sort of physical performance levels and certain skill sets, obviously, that you need to be a SEAL, everything they're training is, can these people turn off regular waking consciousness and merge with the group? Because they have to function as a symbiotic organism, right? SEALs have kind of non-hierarchical, they have non-hierarchical leadership structure. So when SEALs storm a building, the person who knows what to do next gets to be the leader. Now, that might sound like a very SEAL specific team, but think about any company trying to do innovation. Think about, bringing a group of people together to brainstorm and innovate. What are you trying to do? You're trying to get them to function like a symbiotic organism.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to look at. So when I saw that video and actually read the book as well by the guy who it's completely unrelated to caregiving, but the concept that Navy SEALs are trained to be in completely unreliable, unpredictable, chaotic situations, and they have to function in a very specific way in their environment, an organism, right? A group of them. Now, here, we're not an organism. We don't even have anybody else around us. We might have some other people helping us. We might have a trained professional caregiver coming a few hours a day. There may be another parent who will come and replace us for a bit. We may have a little bit of help, but we're doing this all on our own. And we're not trained. We're not trained to think about this in any way. So as I'm sort of thinking about this space, I wanted to share with you, just let me get you back here. The Viktor Frankl quote, who, he wrote this book called The Meaning, Man's Search for Meaning. And that space is what we need to start to think about. And it's not necessarily only what goes into the space in that moment, but think about everything around it that we now need to start to think about that could assist us with the way that we think about that space. So I'm going to finish up here by asking this one question.
It's such a good question.
It's such a good question. First time I was asked that question, I saw how caught I was in what everybody else expected me to do. The people-pleasing Tanya, the good girl, the one who was always doing the right thing for everybody else. And what I have learned over time to do is consider what would be the most loving response to me. And the strangest part about this caregiving situation is that the more I have indulged in the question, the more I have become selfish around this question. I have found that not only am I able to attend and be my best version of myself, my loved one, but I, as I said before, have become a better version of myself too. Because when you start to ask this question, what would love do? It kind of frees you up. But you have to be able to work through, as you also mentioned, Faye, sort of, you know, you're kind of leaving your past behind, right? You're leaving behind who you thought you were. And that's a very exciting thing to do. Because for the first time in your life, it's not working on autopilot anymore. It's not just business as usual. It's not just, oh, I've done this always like this, I'll just keep doing it like this. It's actually, well, I now have to become a much more authentic version of myself. And I have to be okay about that. And if people around me don't fit in anymore, there'll be others who will. Because the person that you're caring for, they're never going to suffer from this. You're always going to do what you need to do for them. I'm going to stop sharing now. We're coming towards the end of this meeting, but I think I'm going to stop now, and we can just chat together off recording. And but I just wanted to thank you for showing up, and it means the world to me. And really, it means everything. So I will stop recording.